Hello, coming from the corner of Morris and Queen. This is Atlantic News Podcast. My name is Chris Green. I'm the owner of Atlantic News, and we are the last newsstand in Halifax, not a news outlet. And what I'm doing is interviewing the 6 candidates for District 7, the District 7 council seat for the upcoming elections. And this is so voters understand who the candidates are and go out and vote. If you're not familiar with it, the online voting starts tomorrow, October 8th. It goes through October 19th. In-person voting, there are 2 days before Election Day on October 12th and October 15th. Election Day is on October 19th. The polls are open throughout HRM 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. I'll include links from the city that explain all this stuff, but please vote. And with that, pardon me, I'd like to welcome Peter Sonnichsen. Yeah, Sonnichsen. Pardon me, Peter. So, Peter, welcome to Atlantic News.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And what we do when we're interviewing people that write books, we ask them what's their book about. So I'll ask you, what is your candidacy about, briefly?
Oh, it's an excellent question. What's my candidacy about? Well, my candidacy is about me. I'm running based on who I am, my background, what I've always been. And, I like to say I'm running because I've never actually walked. I've always been racing. I think they said from the day I was born, I was racing, and I haven't stopped. I was a pretty good runner, too. And I still play senior men's basketball, which is a very serious league, over 45. So,
I'll have to join you. Basketball was my game.
It is. A lot of people aren't aware that there's a Grand Masters League of 18 teams.
Wow.
Referees, formal games, a draft for players. It's very serious stuff.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that afterwards. Nice.
My campaign is all about a chemistry I've had with this peninsula since the day I was born. I have a chemistry with this city. Perhaps it's because of its proximity to the ocean. Perhaps it's multi-generations of family, history, memories. But collectively, it is who I am. So I have a chemistry and I have a career in public service. The two hand in hand led me to return home 9 years ago with my family, raise them here, and take that step that I've always taken into public service and having a say and a contribution into my community, which is something that started way back in university. But my campaign is all about 3 main pillars, and it is about public safety, it is about affordability, and it is about strong city service delivery. It's called Back to Basics because it's getting back to doing what we do best as a municipal government, run the city. And after unprecedented growth, I can't see a better theme of stopping, reevaluating how we've handled this growth, and ensuring we build a very solid base going forward. Because we are going forward, we are growing, we can bring all the history and character to life as we do it, but it has to be done carefully. I see us at a crossroads. I see us at a time where we need people that go into government having already accomplished something, so they're up and running. And of course, it comes back to me and my campaign. Well, I've been in public service since university. I've worked with all levels of government my entire life. I've gotten things done in government. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to have the relationship I have, my family have with this community, to be able to take that and impacting change as we go forward and grow. And I'm pretty excited about it, to be honest. But
Nice.
Having knocked on doors for 5 months, I might seem a little lethargic at times. You might have
No.
to.
No, you don't come off as lethargic at all. So tell me a little bit about that background in chemistry. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? You said you left for a while. So where'd you grow up? What was your profession, and then what brought you back to Halifax?
Well, I think the irony is with that question, I was born across the street from where we're sitting,
Oh, where the hospital used to be.
where the hospital, the infirmary used to be. And I tell my kids that, they're 11 and 9, quite routinely.
And they say, you were born in a parking lot?
That's exactly. So it's a running joke in my family. But, it's very ironic. This is a special corner. I remember it over the last 50 years. And I was born across the street.
Okay.
And my mom met my dad on Roby in a boarding home.
Okay.
I have a lot of history here. Multiple cultures came together.
Nice. So you were born here. Where'd you go to university? Here in town?
No, my dad, we left when I was in grade 4.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was involved with the grocery store business.
Hmm.
And he took over the IGA grocery store in Shelburne, Nova Scotia.
Okay.
And he built it up and built a larger one with a strip mall, which is now home to Boxing Rock Brewery in Shelburne.
Nice.
So my dad built that, but the early 80s, the high interest rates, we lost everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he never really recovered from that. And as a family, we moved around a lot. Ultimately, I went off to university and moved to Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to university at Acadia University.
Mm-hmm.
And I studied sciences. And I tried out for the football team, which leads me to, some things that I'm driven toward that I can't explain. So I was cut from the football team, thankfully. I was in good shape, but I didn't know how to play.
So your brain is still intact.
Yes, I didn't take any hits. And so I wandered into the university newspaper. And ultimately, because I ran several articles and they all made the front page, there was some politics and the editor was removed. And I ran for it and I became editor of the university newspaper, the Athenaeum.
Hmm.
And we were putting out a 24-page paper every week with color in university. So at some point, 4 or 5 months later, the university student government election opened. And I don't know why, but I looked at the three candidates running for president of the university student body and decided on some level that I could do a better job. And they were all established in their respective fields, president of the business school, former student union president, a 2-year sitting counselor.
And then here you have a guy who was cut from the football team. Now, it sounds like this is a happy ending. You were elected. You won this election.
I was. I ran hard by myself, not too far unlike this campaign, and I won.
And this was student body president.
Yes, full-time for a year.
So that's a big gig.
Huge.
Yeah, and then after that, what was your profession before, which brings you to here?
Well, I was recruited by Procter & Gamble at a university,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because of extracurriculars.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into Procter & Gamble, and I was there for 2 years, and I was doing fine, doing quite well, actually. But I had this hunger to return to public service.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to, it was such a fulfilling experience to work at that level that I missed it. I wanted to get back into it. So
Mm-hmm.
I was paying off my undergraduate degree, and I discovered the RCMP had a law program.
Hmm.
So during the recruitment process, they told me they had a law program. I figured this was a great way to get my law degree, return to Halifax, set up a practice, and get back involved in politics.
Hmm.
Well, as you know, life happens. And I ended up, after 5 years in the RCMP, not being interested in getting a law degree. I had a phenomenal experience. Border town, rural border town on the state of Idaho in the United States. And in British Columbia is where I was. And gravitated from violent crime to white-collar crime. And I jumped to fraud, stock market crime, national security, anti-terrorist fundraising.
Wow, all sorts of stuff. So when did you move back to Halifax while still being with the RCMP?
I went Vancouver, Ottawa, And then I had 2 children
Mhm.
in Ottawa. I got
Mhm.
married when I was in Ottawa.
Mhm.
And that's where I made the decision to walk away from Ottawa and lateral to Halifax, where I wanted to raise my family.
So when did you move back here?
We moved back here in 2015.
Great. And your family? How many kids do you have?
2.
2. And they're grown, out of college now?
No, they're 11 and 9.
11 and 9. Wow, good for
Yes.
you. You're a busy man. My
Yeah.
youngest is 14, and just about every gray hair in my head comes from that young man. I understand he takes after me in some ways. But okay, so 2 children, and you've been here for a while. What is it about your work in the RCMP? How do you think that's going to help you be a counselor?
Well, I think it's being able to being able to accomplish something in bureaucratic and political environments. The RCMP is a large bureaucracy. I've worked with municipal, provincial, and federal governments. I spent 7 years in Ottawa, and I'm extremely results-oriented. It is very frustrating trying to get something done. The more people you have in a room, the more difficult it is to get something done. You really have to be results-oriented, and you have to make sure everybody leaves clearly understanding they're returning with a deliverable. And I've been very successful. And it's not just because I spent 30 years working in federal bureaucratic environments. It's because everywhere I've been, I've had the ability to bring people together, to collaborate and get things done. And I bring humor, assertiveness, and goal-driven behavior always to the table. And a touch of humor goes a long way, I'll tell you. So, people ask me at the door, and they want to know policy.
When you're knocking on doors.
They want to know your position. And I end with everyone by saying, there's a number of candidates. Look at their past. That'll give you your answer. Because if you can't walk in, there's 4 votes on the peninsula. 4 votes, including the mayor. So that means...
So 3 different council seats on the peninsula.
That's right.
So you have our District 7. What are the other
7,
two?
8, 9.
7, 8, 9. Okay.
For the most part.
Right.
And the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
So for the most part, concentrated, you've got those 4.
Right.
So you've got 13 outside.
Mm-hmm.
Try to go to a door and say you're going to get something done without talking about how.
Right.
There's only one way you're going to get something done that isn't collectively agreed upon. Right. You need 9 votes, right? So this is a very big piece of our policy and our platform, is how are you going to do it? And you can talk about different policies. You can talk about incentives for builders. You can talk about, redirecting services from the police to ease their workload. You can talk about all that. But what you need to talk about is how have you in the past collaborated? How in the past have you, what do you do to collaborate? Do you have the interpersonal skills? Do you have an understanding and empathy of other people's issues throughout the HRM? Because that is all part of the role of a District 7 councillor.
So what I'm hearing is that, and again, I'm new to this area, not new to politics, but new to this area. What I'm hearing from you is that you, is this right? You're saying a successful councillor, of course, the content of what you're talking about is important, but it sounds like even more important is your approach and how you do it. Am I hearing that right?
100%. 100%.
Because as a counselor, all of you are coming in not really knowing the details about what's happened in the past, right?
Yes, whether you've participated with the present council or not, you're going into a brand new council, potentially a brand new mayor,
right.
Depending on who wins. Everything's going to change.
Right.
Everything. The entire dynamic changes. A new family member arrives. The entire chemistry of a family. Get a dog. The entire family member dynamic changes.
And how you're interacting with those other council members is going to matter. That's for sure. So you talked about your candidacies built on 3 pillars. Let's go through those. And I'm sure that these topics that I have on my sheet are going to come out. Tell me about the first pillar that you're going to pop in make a difference?
Okay, well, I'll stick firstly with my background.
Yep.
There's nobody more capable for police reform of any kind than me. I've worked nationally, from operations to administrations.
Nice. So police reform. Tell me, here in Halifax, what does that mean? What needs to be reformed, and what are your ideas on how to do that?
Okay, we have a double whammy the last 5 years. You've got encampments and spillover crime, and you've got Halifax Police Service that's just been literally almost driven into the ground, that's in a human resource crisis.
Asked to do things that really is not in the job description.
Well, there is no job description with policing. I'll tell you that, first and foremost.
Yeah, it's like a teacher, isn't it? You're expected to do everything.
Exactly. I can remember fellow police officers going to neighborhood disputes repeatedly and saying, this isn't police work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, everything's police work.
So what's the reform then? So you say that we're in this tough situation with homeless, and the police are expected to do everything. So what's the reform that's needed?
Well, it's fairly comprehensive. Right now, there's been close to 100 Halifax City police officers on long-term disability. 85-ish have left in the last 2 years for the fire department and for the RCMP.
Just don't want to deal with the stress.
There's another large number that are up for retirement.
Hmm.
Okay, this is a frontline public safety service that is in very difficult shape. Taking some services away is just a drop in the bucket. The morale, leadership, benefits, psychological support, workload, recruitment, this is a collective thing. And
so what do you do about this as a counselor? How do you nudge this in the right direction?
well, historically, council has taken a hands-off approach.
To the
Council
police.
should not get involved in operations, even though legally they have a right to have input. They've chosen not to exercise it. But administratively, working with the police department to ensure overall that a lot of these areas are being addressed from an administrative support perspective, from a health support perspective.
So you're talking about more oversight from the council, or just making sure that the police are pointed in the right direction? What does it look like for people that really don't know how police departments work?
Well, it begins first and foremost with determining why. Getting in there and working with the police department and finding out why. Why is morale low? Why is our human resources stretched beyond their capacity? Why 10 years ago there were more police officers scheduled to be on the streets than today? Those are very big whys. So that's working with the police union, the senior police leadership, and the council, all working together collectively.
So to identify the problem.
Right.
So it sounds like there's a problem. There's not enough. There's not enough young people going into the profession of police work. Or more people are leaving, or is
I would say that it's a little more complex than that. I think it's full scope. It's fulsome. It's recruitment, but to recruit somebody, you can't just recruit them for money. You've got to offer them a working environment where they feel supported, safe, and there are necessary benefits to support them when they fall. Right? So that's public safety, and that's going on at the very same time that the spillover crime from encampments, where we have a hands-off, soft touch, whatever you want to call it.
So the spillover crime in encampments, what are you talking about? You're talking about that the people that live there, people that hang around these encampments, there is crime that's happening as a result of these encampments? Is that
absolutely?
Yeah.
Like, encampments aren't good for anybody. You know, you have social housing, you have affordable housing.
I mean, they're good for people that don't have a place to live, aren't they?
No.
No.
You have affordable housing, you have public housing, you have homelessness, and you have encampments. Encampments aren't good for anybody. They're not safe or healthy to be in. They're not good for anybody who lives near them. They're not good for the ground.
But help me out, aren't the encampments for people that are homeless and don't have a place to go?
There always will be homeless. There always will be people that don't have anywhere to go. But the numbers of people that we have highlighted that we have, both municipally and provincially, governments have dropped the ball. We've dropped the ball on developing social housing, public housing, affordable housing. And now we have to play catch up. But we have to play catch up a lot faster collectively than finger pointing between municipality and the province.
Mm-hmm.
Doing nothing has done nothing but exacerbate the problem. And the average person at the door, the average voter, doesn't want to hear anymore that it's municipal or provincial. They want to see something done. And I actually feel that things are starting to get done. You're starting to hear and see a lot more movement toward housing. And that has to happen. And it's part of the formula.
So low-income housing, if enough low-income housing is available, the encampments will shrink and go away. Is that right? I mean, that's a very simple way to put it, but is that a starting point?
It's ideal.
To frame it?
Ideal, but at least you can have a better setup for designated tent site with services in a location away from kids, school, elderly, parks.
So what does that look like? Is there an example of where that might be?
I don't know. Todd Vino asked me that on the radio 3 months ago, and I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
But I do know that doing nothing has only exacerbated the problem. And collectively, I mean collectively, it feels like the tide is changing. And now I don't know if that's because it's an election year, soon to be an election year on every level of government.
Things get frozen, right? So I understand there's a managed encampment plan that's 59 pages long that the council's been talking about. A lot of as a council person, one of the six of you that's going to step in, there are all of these documents that are huge, right? I don't know, this managed encampment plan, does this comes from the existing council. Does this mean is there a path forward in your opinion, or does that have to change? What's your understanding of that? And maybe you've already spoken about it here.
Yeah, I mean, I've touched on it, but it doesn't matter what the plan is. The province and the municipality have to have the same strategy. They have to be in agreement, the same approach, the same strategy for anything to be successful. The municipality on their own and the province on their own have not yet accomplished that, regardless of plans. If you get into strategic plans, the city has, I don't know what the number of them are, 15, 20?
There's a lot of them, yeah. So this issue of encampments, and you've talked about the link with police reform. What are some other components that add into these encampments and this homeless issue? Does this tie into affordability of housing? Does this how does that play into this?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've gone through COVID. We went through massive inflation, the cost of living. I mean, that leads into we covered a lot of ground just with my first pillar.
Right.
But that pillar, just to really make it more straightforward, is public safety. And even though it includes encampments, it boils down to everyone being able to move through this city, now with the congestion, on bike, on foot, in car, safely and harassment-free. Now you take that mantra and you work backward and you look at the health of your police force, the health of your fire department, the health of all your other city services in relation to public safety. All right? So that's how that works. So when you come to my pillar, it's just not about police reform.
One issue. Yeah, okay, so that
now
makes
I jump
sense.
to affordability, to answer your question about affordability. Now we're getting into how do we address that?
Okay, so let's step back a second. So in that first pillar, you've talked about police, you've talked about encampments, you just talked about transportation, which is, of course, a huge issue. Let's talk a little bit about how is that involved in this pillar. I imagine it involves cars, it involves walking, it involves buses, it involves bikes.
Yes. Well, when I started out, I didn't include transportation under public safety. But after canvassing right across the community, it came up again and again. So when it comes to safely moving through the city, that's more or less addressed through public safety.
Right, because
When I talk about
certainly an issue right now. Traffic has increased. People want bike lanes, but bikers are upset. They feel like it's not there. Cars are upset because they feel like it's not there. I even hear, as a new person here, if you want bike lanes, do you have to cut down trees? Wow, that's kind of strange. So all these things, I know these aren't simple issues, but so now public safety and transportation. So what do you start with? Do you start with cars and people coming in? Do you start with bikes, or
well,
talk about that?
On the mobility issue, like primarily that comes under my third pillar, strong city service delivery.
Okay, and
I
of course the
mentioned it-
pillars are connected, but yeah,
Right,
go
but I
on.
mentioned it under public safety because people don't feel safe moving through the city. But I actually address mobility under pillar 3, which is strong city service delivery.
Mhm.
And that includes transit, traffic, roads, everything that we see as we move through the city that the city provides.
Okay, so you have your pillars involve the different issues within them. I'm starting to that makes sense. So let's finish up the first pillar, the public safety. Specifically, what does transportation have to do with public safety?
Okay,
Give an example.
Good
Just
question.
For people to hang their hat on. Yeah.
good question. So right now, you can have construction going on in 3 different parts of the city that almost prevent you from getting out of the city. We've had unprecedented traffic congestion. That leads to people racing through the city to get to where they need to be.
Right. You take
To
the
get
back
the kids.
roads. You're driving through residential areas. Yep.
They're cutting through lanes. They're bicycling through traffic. Pedestrians are jaywalking. We've got scooters that go 40 kilometers an hour now.
And there's no rules on scooters, right? Do they drive on the sidewalk? Do they drive on the street? Also, with cutting through the neighborhoods, I noticed that if you're lucky enough to live in a neighborhood that, I don't know if you have people speaking for you, a sign goes up saying you can't take a right turn here between this hour and this hour, but if you live in other areas, there's no signs.
No, exactly. And one key ingredient that we haven't covered is that we have a senior demographic in our city. And we haven't even touched on elderly moving through our city, having to navigate bikes, electric scooters, the crosswalks with the speed cars are traveling. I watched a car today fly over one of the speed bumps. I think it got a couple of feet in the air going over it. There is no enforcement. There's no 24-hour bylaw enforcement. There are no boots on the ground. There is no foot patrol coming.
Okay, yes, because I was going to ask, so what are the solutions to this or ways forward? So it sounds like one is to enforce the laws that are in place. And that means more public servants, could be police, could be others, that are out there monitoring this. Is that what I hear?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I hear.
But that means you have to pay for more cops, yeah?
We
in a
pay
fixed-
for more cops every budget.
We do, okay.
I think there was 8 or 9, forgive me, I don't remember the number, approved last year at the last budget. There's always more police officers approved at the budget. But when you look at where they're returning and how long they're lasting and the service level we're getting, there are some chronic problems, some very complex issues that need to be addressed before you're going to see boots on the ground. And aside from the fact, council shouldn't direct the police operationally, but it has to be redressed administratively.
Now, boots on the ground, somebody might hear that and think military. I mean, right? We need
Yes.
boots on the ground, but that's just a phrase you're using for having more public servants out in the city enforcing rules. Is that what I hear?
It's. I guess I should use the language foot patrol.
Oh, well, no,
because from end to end, from the waterfront to Spring Garden Road to up and down South Park, they're virtually asking with great desire for the return of a dedicated foot patrol. I would be the last person to be talking about militarized zone.
Right. I'm not insinuating you're talking about military. Yeah.
But I'm saying, and I'm telling them they're not coming. And I like to refer to it as boots on the ground because, that metaphor where you see, I envision
there's a presence. People are enforcing laws.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're also instilling respect for law and order. Go visit any modern city, and our city will become or is becoming a modern city in some respect. They have a very respectful presence in their police department and visibility of their police, especially in high volume neighborhoods, tourist neighborhoods, business neighborhoods.
Yeah.
We have a building that severely needs to be replaced. We should have a police department where you walk in the front entrance and it reflects the diversity of our
You're
community.
talking about the main police.
Our main police headquarters.
Across from a pool, which I've heard needs to be updated as well.
Pool,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, we really have to look at, what it is we want to show the world. As our previous mayor, traveled around as a great ambassador to our city. Come and see Halifax. Come invest in our city. Well, you know what? When they come, we have to show them that we take pride in this city. We take law and order seriously. We take littering seriously. We take our environment seriously.
Right.
We take traffic control seriously.
And this all ties into the pillar of public service.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's the second pillar of your, and these are the three pillars of your plan, which you mentioned.
The pillar 2 would be affordability.
Okay. Let's.
Greater affordability for others.
So what does that look like if you're elected?
That looks like, I will simplify that to saying everybody deserves a roof over their head, a meal, and to be able to walk and move through this city harassment free with pride. So it's kind of like, coming back to the military theme there, we don't leave anybody behind. And we are leaving people behind. Our governments.
People in encampments.
And by them ending up in encampments and us able to do nothing about it, our governments have dropped the ball. If you take away, everybody has a lot to say about their government and taxes and whatever issue they may have. But as soon as they become a victim in some relation of crime or go without funds for food, you get hit right in the face with what is really important.
Right.
Are we a community that leaves anybody behind? It feels like we are. When you have a hands-off with these encampments, I think it's the best example of doing nothing has been the worst thing we could possibly do.
So what can the council do in terms of affordability concerning the encampments? Can the council what can the council do? Build more public housing? What?
As I said, the council has got to work day to day with the province. We've got to do it collectively. It's the only way. Other than that, you're just throwing money in different directions and hoping for the best. This is extremely, homelessness, affordable housing, mental health, addiction, crime. These are all very complex, and we have many people working on these things day in and day out. But the governments are the ones that need to step in and build housing, affordable housing and public housing. And until they do, and do it well, there's not much anyone can do other than contain.
Right.
If you think going back to encampment, you spend your day getting proper services, addiction counseling, and you go back to an encampment, or you go to work, you have a job, your issues aren't that. It's just affordability. You don't have drug issues. You don't have mental health issues. You just can't afford it.
And how do you go to a job if you live in an encampment? That's
and people reportedly do.
it's got to be a tough one.
That has to be very hard on self-confidence, self-esteem, hope. And if you don't have mental health issues, well, spending time in encampment,
They'll
I
find you.
wouldn't wish that for anyone.
Yeah. So under this affordability umbrella, you talk about the encampments. What are the other aspects of this that you could speak to?
Well, I think if you reach beyond encampments and public housing, and you start talking about just basic affordability, right? It is development. We need to build more housing, create greater volume or demand.
Now,
bring the demand down so that the rents come down.
Don't we? I drive around Halifax, and practically on every other street corner, I see a high-rise being built. But are those new apartments going to help with the homeless issue?
No. They're not going to help unless they're mandated to have a certain percentage of affordable housing units in them.
Basic economics will tell us that they'll help with affordability, because if the supply goes up, the price of housing should go down.
But the other challenge with that argument is economic in relation to where the jobs coming that people will be able to afford all this development, right? There's a piece there that, and I don't know what the salary range would be, but let's just say $75,000 to $100,000 a year to afford, $3,000 two-bedroom apartment.
Right.
Right. So we need good jobs. People need good jobs to fill up all of these developments. So there is a piece to it about job creation.
And can the council do anything about job creation in Halifax?
Well, we're starting to reach well beyond the capabilities of municipal council.
Right.
Municipal council, the more we talk about it, we can tend to get away with the simplicity of it. But municipal council, primary role is public safety, 35 cents of every dollar, which is fire and police and ambulance, right? 35 cents in every tax dollar is public safety, affordable housing, affordability through the budget, and strong city service delivery.
Which
Right.
I imagine includes buses.
Transit.
So where does transit fit into all of this? Does the city need more buses? Does the city need different routes? Does the city need a return to streetcars? Does the city need more? What's the way forward with this, with public transportation?
Absolutely. First and foremost, we need to improve our transit system. It ripples through our entire integrated mobility plan.
So improve it. What does that look like? Improve it. Quality, quantity. What?
Rapid transit are fast express lines. They've been mapped out. They need to be implemented.
Because now with traffic, buses sit in that traffic.
Absolutely. And the bus lanes narrow the vehicle traffic. See, the municipality has an integrated mobility plan.
Yes.
With complete streets.
Which is 182 pages, by the way.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
it is. And I've reviewed it, and it's very frustrating that there are easy fixes. There have been easy fixes along the way just to take a little pressure off here and there. But there's been a real complete lack of action around it. It's bike network will come. Rapid transit will come. Electric ferries will come. Just be patient. Meanwhile, nothing is done. And
okay,
the problems get worse.
So you spoke about the buses, better lanes, rapid transit. What needs to happen with bikes?
The entire thing needs to be revisited. The entire biking network needs to be revisited for one main reason, and that is the present one suitable for the geographic terrain of the peninsula?
And you'd say the current one is not? Or do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. All I know is you take somewhere like Lower Water Street. I've canvassed all through that area. Door knocked. The traffic there comes to a standstill. It's one way. There's a bike lane. there's trucks unloading from the ports. They sit there, jammed up because of crosswalks from the people getting off the ferry, from cars trying to enter from various lanes. It is so bad down there that a lot of the residents park at the superstore. They walk home, and after traffic rush hour, they go home and get their car.
Right. Now, I imagine with all of these plans we're talking about, past councils, past government administrations have looked at this and studied it. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, and I'll add to that. But here,
so the plans are there, yes?
Well, they are plans, yes. Plans that I believe need to be revisited based on the changes of our city and population.
The numbers coming in at such a small
the geography, the size of our streets, the decision to put bike lanes on main thoroughfares, trying to separate traffic and vehicles on the same street instead of integrating them. There's just, from my perspective, a whole lot of questions. Now, coming back to Lower Water Street, where you have added a bike lane, all right, which many people there tell me that are not used. You have standstill traffic. I go to a mayoral debate, and they're talking about real-time traffic surveillance, cameras, and all of these sorts of things. And I'm sitting there, and I've heard it 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, one police officer gets out of his car with a $20 vest and a $10 cone for an hour at rush hour, can flush that whole lane every day. There's some real basic fixes to some of these things that would alleviate pressure while we examine, the challenges of a city that's had unprecedented growth. Like, listen, nothing's going to be fixed overnight, but there's little things we can do if we actually are focused. The province is working with the municipality on the joint regional transit plan.
Which, by the way, the regional plan, from what I understand, Phase 4 is 353 pages.
Yes, but they're presenting but the important thing about that is they're presenting in the fall after sophisticated modeling, and they're looking at what we do need to look at is the entire province, including the HRM, the movement of vehicles, people, and goods.
So the relationship between urban, suburban, rural.
Right, and they're specifically looking at how one block up on a bridge shuts down the entire rush hour.
There's ripple effects. Right.
So the key to that is they're supposed to be using high-level modeling. They're supposed to be presenting it in the fall. And
who's they?
The provincial government for the GRTA. And there's supposed to be federal funding tied to it. Okay. And rapid transit is part of that.
Now you say supposed to be. Are you
right?
Is this going to happen?
I have no idea. I would hope it is. If contracts are signed before there's a turnover of government, or if that's always a complicating factor. But you've got to believe that a lot of our issues here are tied to provincial and federal funding.
And that goes
and
back
it's in the best interests of getting some of that federal tax dollar and that provincial tax dollar into the city. Because there's no question, nationally, cities are growing at a significant pace. Rural is evaporating, and mayors and councils are becoming stronger. So things are moving in that direction. It's just, I guess, for various governments, is it fast enough? And can you get enough done before the next election cycle? So we're moving to a budget every 4 years now. That's an improvement, because now we can tie benchmarks to that.
Remind me, how long is the term of a councillor?
4 years.
4 years. And budget every 4 years. So they'll run together.
It was every year.
That makes sense. So we've talked about in terms of your platform, you've got the pillar of public safety, the pillar of affordability, and the third one?
Well, it was the strong city service delivery.
Strong city. So we've talked about these.
Well, let me add one point to that, because transit's a huge piece of that.
Yes.
Roadwork is a huge piece of that. How is it that roads and water and even the Bridge Commission cannot communicate around construction, what they're doing and when? There is no communication. What does that do? It contributes to one of the worst Septembers
Yeah, I have to tell you, dropping off my son and my wife at Ombre Academy across from Dal, it was a head scratcher why there was construction done right in that area the first week of school for both Dal and the
Yep.
high schools.
I can't,
And I'm
listen,
not blaming public servants; they're out there doing their thing. But
no,
wow,
no, but there's a big disconnect when projects are awarded and when they get done,
mm-hmm.
and
And
how
that's
they're
coordination,
done
right?
and how they're communicated, and that's another piece. So when it boils right down to it, and I know I've heard mayoral candidates speak along these same lines, is we can do a much better job at this, at communication, at knocking off the low-hanging fruit, while we collectively work on the bigger issues. And like I said right from the very beginning, I'm running on 3 pillars: public safety, affordability for all, and strong city service delivery, which is all around, mainly around transit and construction and communication, right? But having said that, and having addressed so many policy positions, I can tell you the single most important thing is to be able to go in there with a vision and work collaboratively and cooperatively with 16 other people. Because if you can't do that, it doesn't matter what you stand for. And if you don't understand the layers of government, there's been talk at mayoral debates about Halifax building its own public housing unit. So now we're talking about redundancy and costs and administrative, organizations that mirror the provincial government, which is what we're already paying for. There's only one. It's relationships and cooperation. Is the underlying fundamental part of municipal politics.
So, pardon me. The issue of the character of Halifax, the historical character. This is a city that's been around a lot. Now it's changing very quickly. Development is needed. Development is happening. Is there a problem with the city retaining the piece that makes this unique? We have something like $30 million worth of spending by the people coming in on the cruise ships, and they want to walk around and they want to see a city. But I think every port probably looks the same when you come in a cruise ship. But how do we make sure that Halifax retains the unique nature that it was and is? But how do we retain that, but also moving forward with development and growth?
Well, it's a really good question, because you have two minds that come forward when you're canvassing. One is fear of change, and the other is the fear we'll stop progressing. And depending on what part of District 7 you're in, there's no question. There's clarity around their polar opposites. For example, the Housing Accelerator Fund that was adopted unanimously by council,
Right.
and fiercely opposed by certain parts of the community.
So that's been adopted.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that's our map going forward in terms of development. Is that correct?
Well, MAP is good.
It's our guide.
Yeah,
Our guide, our map. What is it? What is it?
Well, why I stumble over that one is because the next council is basically being handed it. And here's the change.
And
here's what we voted.
It's been decided, correct?
It's been decided.
Yes.
Now you can implement it.
Okay.
Without any checks and balances, without any real understanding of its impact on infrastructure, without its consideration for heritage and architectural design, all the things you talk about.
So what are you going to suggest if you get into council? What is to be done with this accelerator fund that's been decided from the last council? What do you do with it?
Well, that's a really good question, because I've asked the same thing. I've asked what can be done. I would like to know, can it be changed? Can it be amended? Is there any flexibility? Because I don't know. I don't know. I think it's going to be fairly clear that a contract, an obligation has been established between the municipality, and I feel that it's going to be up to the new council to be prepared to implement it. And what you can and can't do in its implementation is a big question mark, because it should be done with care and consideration for maintaining the very things that you suggest. Yeah, people come here. They come here to see this beautiful port city, a character city.
But one of the country's oldest cities.
One of the country's oldest cities. But they also expect modern conveniences, which is why I really like the Downtown Business Commission's Vision 2030. They had a big send-off of their 4 key pillars, their vision, where they'd like to see the city in 2030, and they revolve around the arts, entertainment district, around mobility, and it's quite exciting, and it's the type of thing that any visitor would benefit from. But I'm getting a little bit removed from what really people care about. I think people
the people that live here.
The people that live here, yeah. Well, they certainly enjoy the economic impact
of $30 million a year, of course, yes.
But I do think that at the end of the day, for those of us that live here and want to preserve what Halifax has always means 2 things. One, accepting the city is changing, it's growing, and it's demanding modern services. And that impacts trees, that impacts structures that may or may not be desired to be maintained by 50% of people and want to be cherished by others. There's tough decisions that are always going to have to be made, right? But the city is changing. But I come back to the Housing Accelerator Fund, and it's like guidelines around its implementation, especially in residential neighborhoods. Building up on corridors. Our population's growing. We need both. We need units, but we need affordable housing. So, yeah, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge to make everybody happy.
Nice. Well, we've reached the end here. I have one last question that I ask, and that's, I know all of you are busy. You're knocking on doors. You're talking to people. You're pressing the flesh, but share with us what's something that you've either read or watched on TV or heard on the radio that's been really cool and really interesting that you can pass on. Any of the above. It could be TV, it could be movie, it could be a podcast you heard, it could be a book you read, it could be a magazine you read. Oh, anything. And it doesn't. This is not doesn't have to do with politics. It can, but just something interesting that you can share that was that was worth watching or listening to.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I already put it out there in one of the surveys, but I just finished the book Politics and Principle by Stephen McNeil, a former premier of our province, retired.
Okay.
And I found it very insightful, having this being my first campaign, to follow his early campaigns and his rise to leadership of the political party. So I do find that quite fascinating. I've done, as you know, I spent my last 7 years in Ottawa working national security, and I visited and worked in many different countries, and done many interesting things. And running a campaign has been one of the most interesting and challenging things I've ever done, because you start literally with nothing. You build an image, you build a message, you then go out and build that message, signage, etc., market yourself, and knock on complete strangers' doors for 5 months.
It is,
yeah. So I really found reading that book was timely.
It was helpful. Well, thank you for that. And Peter, thank you for this discussion. I want to thank you for coming here. I want to wish you the best of luck, and let's hope that all of these discussions get more people to vote.
That'd be wonderful. That would be
Okay.
absolutely wonderful. Get out the vote.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.